So recently we were honored to be on a panel on a podcast that was talking about relationships, men and women. And we kind of wanted to talk about one of the questions and how we answered it from our perspective and our experience in this field.
Okay, so the question was actually two separate questions that we answered. Do you believe that men prefer to be married or single? And same question goes for women.
Yeah.
And it was a really difficult question to answer without all the caveats.
Impossible for me to answer a question simply one layer, because how?
It's very nuanced. But our answer was essentially that we think we want to be married.
As
right?
men.
Men think they want to be married. But when we're going off of what marriage actually is and the weight of it, we lean more toward men want to be single.
Yeah. So like, I answered the question, I believe that men want to be single, right? But I know that if you asked a man prior to marriage, or even a man that has been divorced, do you want to be married? The answer is going to be yes, majority of the time. But then when it comes down to what marriage entails, your responsibilities, the weight of being a husband, of being a provider, of being a spiritual covering, of being faithful, of having to say, hey, I want to go out tonight. Is that okay? How to communicate, like the weight of that, you would prefer to be single. And that's how it will be if you have not done the work to prepare to be a husband ahead of time. And so that was my take on it. It might not sit well with everyone, but I feel like I've talked to a lot of men and a lot of marriages. And so this is not something that's just based off of my experience, but literally what we coach through, what we are told, what we see. And that's how I feel about it.
Yeah. And so we want to talk about, how do you prepare for marriage? Because we adamantly believe that there is no way that you can fully prepare for marriage. And that is because you have no idea what marriage is going to be like. You think that you have an idea, you think that you have a clue as to how you will behave, how your spouse will behave, because you know yourself, you know your spouse. But then you get married and you realize, I do not know my spouse as well as I thought I did.
And I don't know myself. That's really where it gets funny, because once you go into covenant in your union with your spouse and with Christ, you are now one. And that you start looking in a mirror and you're seeing parts of you that you had not addressed before, things that you would locked in a box and you're like, that'll never come back out. And you're like, well, what is this? This is new, but it's not. It's just something that hasn't been tackled. And so it's like, man, you bring out the worst in me. But it's just them displaying you. And so one of the ways to be properly prepared is to tackle the unknowns. If you want to go into a marriage like, hey, I'm pretty self-aware, go to therapy first. Go to counseling. Tackle the childhood trauma. Tackle the experiences in college with friends, or with how you felt about your body, relationships, or anything like that. Know yourself very well. Have a great relationship with Christ. And by great, I mean prayer, study, spending time alone. Be rooted. Those are two things that you can definitely do before marriage to prepare for marriage.
Yeah, and one of the other things, and really kind of the ultimate thing, is knowing what covenant is and knowing how accountable you are for it.
Yeah.
And not expecting things to go a certain way for the rest of your life, because that will not be the case. There are a million things that can go wrong. You are living life together.
Yeah.
There are a million changes that will happen that you don't necessarily need to prepare for, but be open to the reality that that's going to happen.
Yeah.
And you still have to be with your spouse and stay in your role as it's happening.
Yeah.
And so going into it with a mindset of, no matter what happens, no matter how we change, no matter what in life changes, this is my partner. And we are going through it together. We are going to work through it and figure it out together.
For better or for worse.
Yes.
If her worse is taking place, that doesn't mean that, oh, I get to just go away. That's not commitment. That's not covenant. That is not marriage. It's heavy, but it can be beautiful.
Yeah. And we're honoring God. God is being honored first in our marriage.
Yeah. Put God first. Honor God, you'll honor your spouse. Honor God, you'll honor yourself.
Yeah.
Successful marriage.
Yeah.
Basically. Listen, marriage takes effort. So put it in.